You're still awake. You've been lying here for a while now, long enough that the ceiling has become familiar, long enough that you've checked the time more than once, and each time told yourself you still have enough hours if you fall asleep right now. But you're not falling asleep right now. Your body is still. Your breathing is slow. Everything around you is exactly as quiet as it needs to be, and yet something in you won't let go. Maybe it's a thought you keep returning to. Maybe it's no particular thought at all. Just a low, restless current running underneath everything. The feeling of being awake when you shouldn't be, of your mind refusing to cooperate with the hour. Here is something worth knowing. Fighting that feeling, telling yourself to stop thinking, to relax, to just go to sleep is one of the least effective things you can do, because the effort of trying to stop a thought activates the same neural pathways as the thought itself. The harder you push, the more present it becomes. So tonight, we're not going to fight it. We're going to do something different. We're going to give your mind exactly what it seems to want right now. Something to rest on. Something slow and dark and quietly interesting. To occupy the part of you that won't be still and let everything else gradually go quiet. There's a particular kind of insomnia that isn't really about sleep at all. It's about attention. Your mind, in the silence of a late-night room, finds itself without a task, without a problem to solve, without the steady stream of external input it's been processing all day. And so it generates its own. It reaches back into memory. It projects forward into possibility. It circles around the things it hasn't finished processing. It does what minds do. It works. The mistake most people make is treating this as a malfunction, as something to be corrected, as evidence that something is wrong. But the mind working at night is not a malfunction. It is a mind that hasn't been given something more interesting to work on. Tonight we're going to change that. We're going to move through 5 territories: the mind at night, strange human behaviors, uncomfortable truths, the nature of thought itself, and the quiet realizations that tend to arrive only when everything else has gone still. None of this requires you to do anything. You don't have to analyze, you don't have to remember. You just have to let it in, let it drift through you, the way sound moves through a quiet room, without needing to go anywhere in particular. By the time we reach the end, your mind will have had something to hold on to, and holding on to something is often all it needed to finally let go. The brain you have right now, lying in this room, is not the same brain you had this afternoon. Not structurally, not chemically. The shift began before you got into bed. As light faded, your brain began releasing melatonin, a signal that changes more than just sleepiness. It shifts the balance of activity across different neural regions. The analytical, task-focused networks quiet down, and something else moves to the foreground. The default mode network, the system that activates specifically when you're not focused on anything external. When there's no task pulling your attention outward, it turns inward, and it does something remarkable. It connects, it draws lines between things that your focused daytime mind, busy with tasks and decisions and the ordinary management of life, didn't have time to relate to each other. This is why certain realizations only arrive at night. Why solutions to problems you weren't consciously thinking about appear in the dark. Why the things you've been avoiding thinking about tend to surface precisely when everything goes quiet. Your brain didn't suddenly become more perceptive. It became less distracted. There's another shift that happens at night. The amygdala, the part of your brain that processes emotional significance, becomes more reactive after sleep deprivation, more sensitive to perceived threats, more likely to interpret ambiguous information as concerning. This is why the thought that seems manageable at noon can feel genuinely troubling at midnight. The thought hasn't changed, your brain's response to it has, which means the heaviness you sometimes feel at night, the particular weight that certain thoughts carry in the dark, is partly a neurological condition, not a reflection of how serious things actually are. Not a message from some deeper part of yourself that sees more clearly, just chemistry. Just the particular sensitivity of a tired brain in a quiet room. That doesn't make the thoughts less real, but it makes them slightly less urgent, slightly more like weather passing through than like truth arriving. Have you ever noticed how different the same thought feels in the morning? How something that seemed enormous at 2 a.m. becomes manageable, even small. By the time the light comes back, the thought didn't change. The brain processing it did. Hold that for a moment, because the next territory is about the stranger corners of what that brain does. When nobody is watching, human beings are not as conscious of their own behavior as they believe they are. Most of what you do, most of what you feel, most of what you decide happens before your conscious mind gets involved, before the part of you that narrates your own life has time to comment on it. There's a phenomenon called change blindness, the inability to notice significant changes in a visual scene when those changes occur during a brief interruption. In experiments, people are shown a video of a conversation. During a cut, a simple edit, the actor is replaced with a different person, different clothing, different hair, different face. And a startling percentage of viewers don't notice. They continue watching, continue processing the conversation, completely unaware that the person they're looking at is no longer the same person they were looking at before. The mind constructs continuity, it fills gaps. It builds a coherent story out of incomplete information and presents that story to you as reality. Not because it's trying to deceive you, because coherence is more efficient than constant verification. Because if your brain stopped to confirm every assumption it makes, you would be unable to function. But the cost of that efficiency, is that what you experience as perception, is partly construction, a model of reality, not reality itself. There is a related phenomenon called confabulation, where the brain, when asked to explain a behavior or decision it made unconsciously, generates an explanation. A plausible, confident, coherent explanation that it presents as the reason, even when the actual reason was something else entirely. Even when the explanation was invented in real time. The person confabulating doesn't know they're doing it. They believe the explanation they're giving because their brain produced it, and they experience their brain's productions as truth, which raises a quiet question worth sitting with. How many of the explanations you give for your own behavior are accurate? How many of the stories you tell about why you did something, why you felt something, why you stayed or left or said what you said, are post hoc constructions, reasonable, coherent, but not quite the actual reason? This isn't a troubling question, it's a freeing one. It means the narratives you carry about yourself are more flexible than they feel, more revisable, less fixed in stone. The story of why you are the way you are is partly a story your brain told you, and stories can be retold. Here is a simple fact about memory. Every time you remember something, you change it. Memory is not a recording, it is a reconstruction. Each time you retrieve a memory, your brain rebuilds it from components, and in the process of rebuilding, the current state of your brain, your mood, your beliefs, influences what gets reconstructed. Small details shift, emotional tones change, emphasis moves, and then the altered version gets stored again as the memory, which means the memories you've revisited most, the formative ones, the ones you've told many times, the ones that feel most solid and certain, are the ones that have changed the most. The memories that feel like bedrock may be the furthest from what actually happened. Here is another one. The version of yourself that other people carry exists completely outside your control. You have no access to it, no ability to correct it, no way to ensure that what you intended is what was received. Every person who knows you is carrying a slightly different version, constructed from their observations, their interpretations, their projections, from the moments they saw you at your best and your worst, from the things you said and the way they heard them. None of those versions is wrong exactly. None of them is entirely right. They are each a partial view of something that is always more than any single perspective can hold, including your own perspective on yourself. And here is perhaps the quietest uncomfortable truth. The person you were 10 years ago would not fully recognize who you are now, not because you've changed entirely, but because the accumulation of small changes in what you value, what you believe, what you notice, what you no longer notice, adds up to something significantly different. And 10 years from now, the person lying in this bed tonight will seem like someone slightly different to the person you'll be then. Not a stranger, but not quite the same. Most people find this unsettling, but there's another way to sit with it. You are not finished. Whatever version of yourself feels fixed and definite and final tonight is still in motion, still becoming, still capable of surprising you. That thought at 2 a.m. in a dark room is either frightening or quietly hopeful. It's up to you which one it becomes. A thought arrives. You didn't summon it. You weren't building toward it. It simply appeared, the way a sound appears when something in the room shifts, present suddenly without introduction. And here is what most people don't fully understand about thoughts. You are not obligated to engage with them. They are not commands. They are not facts. They are not necessarily reflections of what you believe or who you are. They are events, neural events, patterns of electrical and chemical activity that produce something in your awareness, and then, if left alone, pass through. The suffering most people experience from their thoughts at night is not caused by the thoughts themselves. It's caused by what happens next. The engagement, the response to the thought, the judgment of the thought about the thought. The attempt to understand where it came from, what it means, whether it's true. The loop that forms when a thought is treated as a problem to be solved, rather than an event to be observed. Buddhist philosophy has described this process for over 2,000 years. The idea that the mind by its nature generates thoughts, and that the relationship you have with those thoughts is entirely separate from the thoughts themselves. That you can be the observer of a thought without becoming it, without being carried away by it, without needing to resolve it. This is not as simple as it sounds. Telling yourself to simply observe a thought and actually doing it are very different things. But the direction is useful. Even the partial move toward observation, toward watching a thought instead of inhabiting it, creates a small but real distance. And in that distance, there is something like relief. Have you ever had a thought arrive that frightened you slightly, and then noticed a few minutes later that it had just left without you resolving it, without you figuring anything out? It arrived, it was present, it left, because that's what thoughts do when you stop holding them in place. The loop you're in tonight is made of thoughts you're holding in place, not because you want to, because it feels like releasing them would mean losing something important. But thoughts don't need to be held to be honored. They don't need to be solved to be heard. They just need to be acknowledged, seen, and then allowed to do what they were always going to do. Pass. There are certain realizations that only arrive when everything else is quiet, not because they're new. They've been there in the background for a while. But during the day, there's no space for them. The noise fills the space. The tasks fill the space. The constant low-level management of ordinary life fills the space. And these quieter things wait patiently for an hour like this one. Here is one. Most of the things you're worried about have a much smaller chance of happening than the amount of mental energy you've given them. Not zero, but much smaller. The human brain is wired to weight negative possibilities more heavily than their probability warrants. It was useful evolutionarily. The creature that assumed the worst and prepared accordingly survived more often than the one that didn't. But you are not in a landscape where most threats are physical and immediate. You are in a landscape where most threats are social and probabilistic. And the same system that kept your ancestors alive keeps you awake, running scenarios that are unlikely to materialize in the form your mind is presenting them. This doesn't mean your concerns aren't real. It means your mind is not a reliable calculator of probability. It is a survival machine that prefers false alarms to missed threats. And knowing that doesn't stop the alarm, but it changes what you do with it. Here is another quiet realization. The people in your life, the ones you worry about, the ones you love, the ones you sometimes resent, are each carrying a completely private interior world, a landscape of thoughts and fears and hopes and memories that you will never have full access to, no matter how close you are, no matter how well you know them. There is something about that realization that can feel lonely, and also something that can feel like relief, because it means the weight of fully understanding anyone is not something you're equipped to carry. No one is. Relationships are not about complete understanding. They are about choosing to stay present in the permanent partial knowledge of another person. And one more. This moment right now, this exact configuration of thoughts and half-thoughts, this particular quality of darkness, the specific texture of how tired you feel, the sounds of the room, the temperature of the air, all of it is happening exactly once. It will never be repeated. Not in this particular arrangement. Not with this particular version of you, in this particular room, at this particular hour. Most nights pass without being noticed. This one is being noticed. That's not nothing. Your mind has been working tonight, turning things over, following threads, visiting places it needed to visit. You didn't waste these hours. Even if it felt like you were just lying in the dark, something was happening. Something was being processed. Something was being quietly, slowly resolved. Without you needing to force it, the thoughts are still there. But maybe slightly looser now. Slightly less urgent, slightly more like things that can wait than things that need to be solved before morning. You don't need to figure anything out tonight. The problems that feel largest at this hour are the same problems that will feel different by the time the light returns. Not gone necessarily, but different in weight, different in texture, more manageable in the daylight. Your brain, even now, is doing the work it was designed to do. Consolidating. Connecting, preparing, even in the act of lying still, even in this quiet half-awake place you're in, it is moving toward rest. Not because you're forcing it, because rest is where it's always been going. The thoughts will slow, they always do, not because they've been solved. Because you've stopped needing them to be. The room is dark, your body is still. The tone underneath everything is getting quieter. You don't have to do anything now, you've done enough, just let the dark be dark, let the quiet be quiet. Let the mind find its own way to the place it was always heading. You're almost there.